Hello, welcome. My name is Kate Ager, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce my guest for this podcast, Tracey O'Neill from the Satori Partnership. Tracey, I think it's best I leave you to fully introduce yourself. So, a woman of many talents, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Kate. Yes, my name is Tracey O'Neill. I am a data consultant and I'm also a co-founder of the Satori Partnership. I'm based in Dublin and I'm delighted to be here today.
Brilliant. Well, it's a real honour to hear about yourself and your career, how you've got into it. But I guess, as you've mentioned, data consultancy is your bag. What does a data consultant actually do?
Yeah, so basically what I do with clients is that I go in and look at their business data, so across any function, so whether that be marketing, HR, operations, and help people kind of make sense of it and use it to ideally grow their business. So it's everything from really sort of looking at their data strategy and making that align with their business strategy. So it could be anything from looking at, their marketing data, helping them understand their customers better. It could be around process. So it could be looking at efficiencies and helping them kind of, understand how to allocate resources. That's kind of the main focus of what a data consultant does.
And do you sort of have an experience with people that are maybe at the start of their journey, or have got very little experience of what to do, to those that maybe have been doing it a long time, and you kind of just sort of bring that next level for them?
So from a business perspective, I find there is a term called data literacy, and I find that even the most senior executives in businesses and business owners are not yet data literate. So when I talk to people about their businesses, normally the two things that come up, people will say, yes, we know our sales, so we know what we're making and we know what we're spending. But then I'm asking them sort of at the next level, well, where are you making the money? What segment is it coming from? What industry is it coming from? What are the things that you're spending your money on? And who are your customers? So it's kind of nearly delving down into that next level of really understanding not just your money and your profits, but really what's driving your business. And I think people get a little bit nervous when we start talking about data, because people think data is data science and it's very highly technical and complicated. But from my side of things, what a data consultant does is it's business analytics. So really it's just getting the data, but then interpreting it, visualizing it, putting it on a chart, and helping people understand what the insights are from the data to help them make decisions in their business. But the data literacy thing is really interesting because even if you have one or two people in an organization who understand how to, read charts and interpret data, they have to be able to bring their team along with them as well. And I think that's the whole piece about, the culture, the data-driven culture is something that's really not yet very well developed. But that's something that I am hoping to help people with as we go along.
Yeah. So I guess people are sort of seeing you as sort of this thing that actually can really take their business to the next level. I mean, have you got any examples, or have you seen businesses use it to really help grow, their strategies, their ambitions?
Yeah, definitely. I think the one piece that people really find, I suppose, immediate value, where they can see it visibly helping, is around their customers. So I can really help them understand who are their top customers. One thing that's people often really like to see is if you have customers, let's say over 5 years, who were your customers 5 years ago? Are they still your customers? At what point did they lapse? What were the things that were happening in your business or in the world or in the client's customer's business that made them fall off? And how can you do things differently within your business to either get that business back, or one thing that's very useful to people is cross-selling. So for example, I would do a lot of work, and particularly with this Satori partnership in with recruitment businesses. So one section of the business might specifically hire for accountants, and another section of the business might hire for business support people. So I'm coming along and I'm saying, well, look, you've got all of this business here in accountancy and finance. They probably need administrators. So is there something that you could cross-sell to this particular area, and create a new revenue stream, or sort of identify more revenue for your business as well? So I think the whole idea of really understanding where your money's coming from is really important. And then the other piece around that is personalization. So if you have good data and good data quality, the behavior of your customers. So what they like to buy, what they like to read about, what are the what are the I suppose the levers that are helping you I suppose interact and engage with your customers. And we have all of that data. Interestingly, somebody asked me the other day about how data is used in a downturn, or in an economy where there's we'll not call it a recession, but in a downturn economy. Obviously it's expensive to acquire new customers. So what I'm saying is, but you have all of this data about your old customers. You have 10 years worth of data about customers that worked with you and spent money with you. So go back to that data and find out from that what are their key needs. And personalization is really important, so you can really drill down and understand the customers.
And have you seen sort of that change over the years, and what has been the main factors that affect it? You mentioned, for example, something like a recession. What have you seen has been the biggest impact on people's growth and development as a result of outside factors?
Well, for me, and obviously I'm all about the data, it's just the volume of data. It really is. There's just so much data around, and I think that comes back to people being nervous with data and not knowing what to do with it, and just kind of sometimes they think, oh, there's too much, I don't even know where to start. So they put their head in the sand and they don't do anything with it. Again, I suppose from a recruitment perspective, I started my career as a recruiter, and back in the day, we didn't have email. We had a fax machine in the corner, so you got CVs, resumes faxed in, and then you got on the phone and spoke to somebody. But now recruiters are just overwhelmed. There's just they're getting hundreds and hundreds of applications on the daily basis. So it's difficult for people to really cut through and find out what's valuable. So for me, it's just that volume. I think that people really struggle with. But of course, data has an answer to that as well, because there are signals in the data that will be able to tell you, who's active on the market, and who's potentially looking for a new role, and so on.
Yeah. And so why do investors such as private equity firms consider data as an important business asset?
Yeah, so this is something that I've come across a lot recently, actually. So people, so companies, oftentimes recruitment companies, or any small company, they're either looking for investment, or they're looking for an exit strategy. So the first thing, obviously, that the private equity company or the investor will say is, well, can you give me proof of your proof of your customers, proof of your growth strategy, and so on. And obviously data is behind all of that. So you need the data to give evidence of what's your total market, for example. So what's the total market out there? What percentage of the market are you servicing? But then on the other hand, it's I suppose looking at data as an asset. So the investment company, or the investor, the person who's funding, can really see your potential for growth. So if you have a really well connected data strategy and technology, your company is scalable. So you're not just the person who's in one particular geographic region. You could be globally scalable. So that's obviously very, very attractive. I suppose people who have good data strategy and do good data quality have good compliance typically as well. So, there is a level of data governance in there. And of course, that's always very attractive to investors because, they want to see good compliance, they want to see good structures. Data can help you manage risks so you can predict potentially what's coming down the track within your company and obviously within the wider economy as well.
Yeah, we're very demanding now, aren't we? We expect everything and we want it, explained to us about why, and no one wants to take a risk without something like, data to back it up. So it feels like your role is, more important than ever. So when you hear the phrase data-driven culture, what does that mean and why is it important?
Yeah, so I think it really is. It's very interesting. So particularly since COVID, right? So a lot of people are working from home. So when I go in to talk to businesses about data and KPIs, the immediate reaction is you're just measuring us because we're all working from home, and you want the leadership that want to know what we're doing, and we want to know how many calls we're making. And to a lot of people, that is data, and that is what data is used for. So part of it obviously is yes, we do want to know what you're doing, but that's only part of the story. So what leadership really want to do is, and again, if I use recruitment as an example, your performance data will help you find your secret recipe for whatever it is that you're doing to make you successful. And if you're not measuring what you're doing, how do you know what's working? So, I often say to people, if you're registering, let's say 5 vacancies in a month, how many of those are you filling? If you're filling one, is that good? Is that bad? How does that compare to your peers? How does it compare to what you did this time last year? If your, fulfillment rate, if you're getting 10 vacancies a month and you're only filling 3 out of 10, maybe the thing to do is try and get 15 vacancies so you're filling more. And it's really all around kind of that culture. So it's not, to me, what I try to kind of help people with is don't see it as something to beat people over the head with. It's really helping people understand what's happening in their day that's making them successful, and when you find what's successful, do more of that. And it's really across, I think, data-driven culture, whilst it has to be leadership led, everybody has to buy in, because there is no point in just preaching at people, because people really, it has to make a difference in their day to help them, and it can. But again, it's back to the point there about the volume. Oftentimes there's too much. I see people with 30 KPIs to measure, and it's people just get overwhelmed. The staff in a company just get overwhelmed and say, well, how do we have time to do our job if we need to be meeting all these KPIs? So really my advice would be find 2 or 3 that really help you run your business, and then everything else flows from those and kind of rolls up into those, is what I would say. And as I say, when you find something that works, do more of that. One thing that people do ask me often is for marketing spend. So when we're spending money, what is it that's attracting our customers? So you do need to be really careful of kind of making sure that whatever you're doing, whether it's buying more technology or spending money on advertising, whatever you're spending money on has to have a return. And I think that's really important as well.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a real knack for simplifying it, because as someone who's not particularly, across this kind of area of work, you do seem to have that ability to simplify it. But you spoke about it needs to be sort of that change that everybody's on board with. But have you seen businesses really struggle with the implementation phase, and what was their real sort of hang-ups?
Yes, there's well, so yes, pretty much everybody. But it's trying to not tackle everything at one go. It's really, when you're talking about and obviously this is something that the Satori Partnership helps with as well. So my piece is specifically data and looking at data analysis. But in terms of us as a project, we have one area that would look at innovation. We have one area that would look at change management and culture, process improvement, continuous improvement. So I think the key is not to look at it in isolation, because it is part of a bigger picture. So we often talk, in my world, we often talk about sort of the pillars would be, you have your data, but then you have your technology, then you have your process and your people. And unless all four of those are working in sync, then it becomes imbalanced. So, you really have to look at it. The ones that are successful look at it as a transformation project. So not just tackle one thing. I think what I see where businesses often go wrong is that they buy more technology. So they buy more software and they buy more pieces of kit. And then 12 months later, they're saying, well, we've spent all this money on a new CRM, but we're not actually making any more money. And I'm saying, well, the people don't know how to use it. What is the data that people are looking for? And everybody's actually not using their CRM. They're still over here in their emails and spreadsheets. So the culture change piece and kind of the bedding in part is definitely not to be underestimated, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have any sort of specific examples of like how data has really helped a business become more customer centric?
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose there's two that I can kind of think of. One is really around that piece of embedding the data driven culture. And I worked with a client recently who did just that. They spent a lot of money on tech. They brought me in. We created dashboards, and we realized then, that the management leadership team weren't even using the technology. But what we did was I went in there and I sat with each of the managers individually, and I showed them how to build their trends, how to interpret them. And once the penny clicks with people, then they get hungry for the data, and then they're coming to me saying, show me more. How does this work? What's why is my graph going like this? What's happening there? So I think just that once people really get into it, then they can really use it going forward. But the how to become more client focused is the one where people see the money, and that's when people really kind of start getting engaged. So recently again, we had one of the Satori clients, and we were working with those guys, and they did a lot around their candidate strategy, and they're really really good at they've got a great fill rate in terms of filling their jobs, but they hadn't ever really considered their client and their customer base. So they knew they had all these clients, they knew that they were making money, but they hadn't ever really sat down to segment it and say, right, where are we getting the money from? So it turned out something like 80% of their business was coming from one particular sector. Which they knew, because business owners know this. I mean, they know this. They have a hunch. Oh, we think that's where it's coming from. But when you actually sit down and say, right, here's the data. This is where 80% of your business is coming from. Then conversations go to a different level, because then you can say, right, 80% of our business is coming from here. Have we covered that market? If not, we know that that's what's working. So continue to work on that market. But if we think that market is saturated, what are the other, let's say, back to the cross-selling, are there other vacancies within that particular industry that we're not looking at? And then move it across and say, right, well, what other industries are like these ones? Let's go and approach them. So if there's a sort of a similar industry to where we're making money, but we haven't actually tackled it, let's move across and do that. So that's where the whole business, the strategic part comes in, and really using your data to make those strategic decisions about growing your business.
Yeah, and then so how can HR and people functions use data in more strategic ways?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting, because I think HR and people functions are, dare I say, it's sort of the poor relation when it comes to data. And I often see, marketing teams are really well versed in data and customers and Google Analytics and so on. And operations teams are as well. But from a HR and people function side of things, they are, how do I put this? So basically, people functions are not making the business any money. So they're a cost center. And I think what people functions are really getting to grips with is they need to go to their board and say, right, this is the investment that we're making in our function, and we need to show what return we're getting. And the return that they're getting, they can only show that if they're looking at their data. So again, they might come back and they might say spend. So what is the spend? Which, let's say, recruitment agencies are we spending money with? And we can say, right, here's who we're spending money with, here's how many vacancies we've had, here's how many have been filled. And a lot, we can, that's a sort of an industry standard. What we know that's what people do. But we're now moving into the next level, which is, okay, they've filled our roles, but how many of those candidates have stayed for 2 months, for 6 months? What's the quality of the candidates that people are presenting to us in terms of that fill in our pipeline? And then again, that brings a whole different conversation back to the preferred supplier list, and who are the people that we want to engage with as a corporate that are engaging with a particular supplier. So that's sort of on the talent and recruitment side of things. But then, of course, you can really get into some really interesting pieces around retention. So, what are the key factors that are contributing to attrition? So you might do a survey and you might realize that, you've done a survey and, your people are not happy with X, Y, and Z. That's number one. But then you can use the data to say, is it because are there other factors? People who live more than 10 miles away from the office are unhappy because we're not doing a hybrid working policy for COVID. So when you kind of put everything together, you can start building up a really interesting picture of, what are the key factors that are driving attrition in an organization.
You seem to maintain this incredible passion for what you do, even though probably to someone else, I don't get it. But how do you maintain that sort of eagerness to want to do better, to know more, to be the best at what you do?
I think I've always been a data person. So I think I was saying the other day, even as a child, I was the person who, organized, my books in alphabetical order, and I color coded things. And so I always had, I suppose I had this innate passion for, making things, tidy and putting things in order. So, and that's a lot about what data is. But I think what really gives me the buzz is making a difference. So certainly, when a customer, and particularly, with people who, very senior people in organizations, they are hungry for understanding data and how it can make a difference. And sometimes that very small piece where they get that aha moment. And that's what gives me the buzz. I had a client recently who's in a manufacturing company, very senior guy, and knows his, spreadsheets inside out and his calculations inside out. But we actually put everything on a chart, on a visualization. And it's just a mindset shift. So we're looking at the graph, and he's saying, but why is this over here? In April, there's a big dip. And I'm saying, well, I can't actually tell you what it is. I can show you that it's there. And then he's like, oh, I know why. And then he's able to go and, put a strategy and put something actionable, let's say, in place to make that difference. And that's the kind of thing that I close my laptop at the end of the day and I go and I say, wait to hear what happened today. This is really interesting. And everybody around me like, yeah, no, it's data, but making that difference, I think, is what keeps me excited.
Yeah. And I guess when someone sees data the way you see it and they get it and they suddenly have that realization of the huge impact it can have, has there been any key moments throughout your career where you maybe have had to change things up because there's been something, that, it wasn't working, or a moment where you think, actually, yeah, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing, and, I'm moving in the right direction because you've done so much, you've seen so much?
Yeah. I think one that was sort of sticks out in my mind, and it's funny actually, because it wasn't something that made money, but it was something that saved the company from losing money. So it was a situation where a company that I was involved with at a time in the past had decided that they were going to build an app, so build a new piece of technology. But they did exactly the right thing. They took a data-driven approach to it. So at every stage, they were saying to me, okay, look, we need to measure how this is working. We need to measure the development. We need to measure the new functionality. We need to measure how their customers were reacting to the product. And we kind of went through, and it was very clear that yes, their product was working, but it was not going to be, let's just say it was in the competitive landscape, they weren't moving fast enough, and there were other competitors that were going to overtake them very quickly. And it was quite clear then, using the data, that was what was going to happen. So then they were able to, sit back, take a shift, and say, okay, let's actually, pivot and change direction again. So I suppose one part is using the data to help you grow, but the other part then is using the data to help you avoid making bad decisions, as well. And that's, I suppose, data-driven decision making in action there. But it takes a very special kind of leadership team to be that involved, and to trust the data and to trust what it's saying. Because sometimes people, they're very single-minded, and they'll say, no, well, this is the direction that we're going. We've decided this is what we want to do. So it's a credit to those guys that they were able to say, no, let's move and pivot into something else. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So we now find you at the Satori Partnership, or a big part of the Satori Partnership. Just tell us a little bit about your involvement and how it came about.
Yeah, so I work with, or I worked in the past actually with Steve Carter, who's one of the other co-founders of the Satori Partnership. And Steve speaks, he's one of the key business advisors with APSCO, who are one of the recruitment partnerships in the UK. So one sort of what Steve has been doing for many years is advising businesses on how to grow and become more efficient and so on. And about 18 months ago, he sort of came to me and said, this is what I'm doing, but people really need to be more data driven. What do you think? So I'm like, yes, of course they need to be more data driven. So we started to kind of collaborate a little bit on some projects and so on. And then probably about a year ago, we realized that there was a sort of a niche in the market, particularly within recruitment businesses and talent functions in large corporates, for this digital transformation piece. So data-driven innovation, aligning strategy, becoming more customer-centric. And we sat down and said, okay, there seems to be an appetite for this in the market. Let's see what we can do. And yeah, we've definitely. So there are four of us, four co-founders. So together, and then I think we're sort of 10 or 11 partners, and each of the partners are independently successful in their own area. And then when a project calls for it, we come together and we go off and do a project. I often joke and say we're like the A team, whoever's needed at a time, we head off and do the project. So but like I said before, you do find that even if somebody sets off in a technology project, they need the comms piece, they need the data piece, they need the strategy piece. So oftentimes it does kind of flow across each of our areas. So there's 8, I suppose, different competencies in total in the Satori Partnership that the partners will look at.
And did you ever imagine this is where you're going to be at this point in your career? Are you where you want to be, and what's next? What still have things you want to move on to?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I again always knew that I love data, right? So my primary degree was in information management back in the day. So I always loved that piece of it. Then, like many other people, I fell into my career in recruitment, and I was a recruiter then for about 15 years. But I was always, even though I was a salesperson, I was always the person who was looking at my data and looking at my figures. I worked on temps and contracts, so margins and data and growth was always part of my daily job anyway. And then with the company that I was in, I sort of moved across into this role as a data quality manager. So the company was, I think it had 14 or 15 offices globally. So there was a huge amount of data. And again, I knew that was something that I was really passionate about. So I worked with those guys on doing that sort of data quality role, and then moved into analytics and insights. And then that was kind of coming along when the technology and sort of all of the, the software and sort of the data science piece was sort of aligning at that point, as well as becoming more accessible to people. So I really enjoyed that. And I think now, yes, I am exactly where I want to be, because as I say, what I really get the buzz out of is helping people really get to that aha moment. And when I'm doing that, you can do that when you're employed by a company, but what I really love is helping number of companies, to grow. And so yeah, it really excites me, and I'm hopeful that that's what we'll be doing for a long time to come.
Oh, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, you've shared so many, wise words and insights. I mean, if there's anything else you feel like we've missed, then please do share. I feel like we've covered a pretty good amount. But is there anything else you feel like is something to remember from Tracey
Yeah,
O'Neill?
no, I think my message is really not to be afraid of the data. It can be super complex, and you can go into sort of looking at data science, and you can go into algorithms and statistics, but it doesn't have to be. It can be very straightforward, and you can learn a lot about your business literally from an Excel spreadsheet and a pivot table. So yeah, try and break through the noise, and try and understand that it's not doesn't have to be very complex.
Well, you've brought it to life beautifully and succinctly, which I can imagine at times is tricky when you're trying to really get to the bottom of what you do. But thank you so much for sharing with us. And yeah, best of luck with what you've got ahead and your work with the Satori Partnership. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate.